Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Buteau, and I'm the director here at Monson Arts. Thank you all for joining us. I'm coming to you live from the Monson Arts Gallery, where we're pleased to be presenting the exhibition Always Home, Wabanaki Traditional Arts. I'm delighted to be joined remotely this evening as well by our guest presenters, artist Barry Dana and his daughter, Penobscot Tribal Ambassador, Maulian Dana, whom I will introduce both shortly. I wanted to begin by saying that Monson Arts acknowledges the place from where we are speaking to you today, what is now known as the town of Monson, the state of Maine, and the greater region of New England and maritime Canada, is the homeland of the Wabanaki people. We recognize and honor the Wabanaki, the Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, Micmac, Maliseet, and Abenaki tribes who have stewarded this land through the generations and acknowledge their inherent sovereignty in this territory. We follow their leadership and support their efforts for land and water protection and restoration and cultural sustainability. As guests on these lands, Monson Arts further pays respect to the original peoples with us today and who preceded us here in this place, and we confront our own place in the place of the people of Monson, who are the beneficiaries of the many legacies of colonialism, imperialism, and genocide. As a local point of significance for the land back movement at large, I wanted to mention the recent announcement in the fall of 2020 that the Elliottsville Foundation had returned a 735-acre parcel of land in Piscataquis County, just east of Monson, back to the Penobscot Nation. This is an area that was a critical watershed area, home to native brook trout, Atlantic salmon, deer, and moose, and it's of cultural significance to the Penobscot people. Currently, the Penobscot Nation and the Wabanaki tribes have access to less than 1% of the land that once supported their cultures. For this program tonight, we've put together a list of some great online resources with the help of Barry and Maulian, and encourage everyone to learn more about the current day struggles, successes, and celebrations of the Penobscot and Wabanaki people, or the native communities on the land where you live. These links are also going to be posted in tonight's chat, so it'll be easy to copy and paste them if you'd like, and we can send them out to anybody who's participating tonight as well. And back to the window of three. The exhibit that we've planned tonight's program in conjunction with Always Home Wabanaki Traditional Arts features 17 artists from the Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, and Micmac nations. The works on display, which are some of them are right behind me, they include woven ash and sweetgrass baskets, birch bark baskets, root clubs, and other objects that, beyond being exquisitely made, are also, to quote curator Kathleen Mundell, cultural aquifers, conserving techniques, and other forms of cultural knowledge. And tonight we are delighted to welcome one of the artists in the show, whose work and life, I think, truly exemplifies this analogy. Barry Dana is fully committed to the traditions of the Wabanaki culture. He is a teacher, artist, and former chief of the Penobscot Nation, where he was raised learning traditional skills and values from tribal elders. His passion for the natural world comes through in the beautifully carved imagery of his birch bark baskets, and indeed in all that he does. And he does a lot. It's a difficult task to sum up and introduce all the things that Barry does. A maker, builder, musician, educator, farmer, naturalist, environmentalist, activist, avid runner and hiker. He just returned from the woods this evening for this program, and dog sledder, just to name a few. Barry graduated from the University of Maine at Orono with a BS in education. He also has an associate's degree in forestry. He served as the chief of the Penobscot Nation from 2000 to 2004 and was very active in water rights issues and the Penobscot Restoration Project as well. Maulian Dana, who's with us as well, holds the distinction of being the first person to be named ambassador to the Penobscot Nation, a position she has held since 2017, working to protect the nation's sovereignty, culture, natural resources, and the general welfare of the Penobscot people. Prior to serving as ambassador, she served as an elected member of the Penobscot Nation Tribal Council and has also worked for the Penobscot Indian Nation Enterprises and Penobscot Nation Cultural and Historic Preservation Department. Like her father, she grew up on Indian Island and is passionate about preserving and teaching the customs and traditions of the Penobscot people. Maulian graduated from the University of Maine at Orono with a degree in political science. The format for tonight's program will be a conversation between Barry and Maulian. We will have some tech support from myself here in the gallery, and there will be a Q&A that viewers are asked to submit questions by clicking on the Q&A button within your Zoom screen. And those will be monitored by Maulian throughout the discussion. So without further ado, I will hand the rest of this evening's program over to both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. I can jump in here, I guess, first. Thanks for having us tonight. And this is probably in all the Zoom events I've done, I don't think I've done anything quite like this, just having people watch a conversation with my dad. So it's a good day to be at work right now. This is nice. Welcome everyone, and just a few housekeeping things. If at any point you would like to throw a question in the Q&A, I'll be looking at those as we talk, and when it makes sense, if it makes sense, I can bring them in here and there. We might not get to everything, and I might kind of pick them for if I think they'll add to the conversation. So with all that said, welcome and happy to be here. And I was just talking to Dan before we started the Zoom that I haven't seen my dad all that much throughout the pandemic. And we're having, I think, my first visit at your house tomorrow since all this happened, because my children and I are all fully vaxxed. So we'll be all warmed up and ready to talk tomorrow for sure. I think to kind of get right into things here, we can start talking about art and how, this has played a role in your life, and kind of how you found this creative side, and how you've woven that into this lifestyle that I know very well, because I grew up in it. And I think our listeners will probably, get a lot from just hearing what inspired you in the first place to go down this road as an artist.
Art is sort of like, there has to be a better word for it, because it's an aspect of traditional Native lifestyle. It's almost like everything that we do in our cultural habits, actions, our lifestyle involves some element of art. I grew up on the Penobscot Reservation, born in 1958. And for some crazy reason, I was one of the little tykes that would hang around all the old people. There was several Native artists. They would do the root clubs. They would do ash baskets, and sometimes maybe little things made out of birch bark, but not really the traditional birch bark baskets that I make right now. But I was just enthralled with these old people, and I would hang out with them. Sometimes we'd go up in the woods and gather medicines. Sometimes we'd go up and find some old dump sites and try to look up, find ancient bottles. And if I found one, I'd Paul Dippy Dog would give me a nickel or something, you know, so I was an entrepreneur back then even. And I always said, when I grow up, I want to be like these guys. I want to be making traditional Penobscot art. And Maulian, you'll recognize this last name. Sanabe was probably one of my biggest inspirations. I would hang out with him and he would be carving his canes. And, you know, all the old elders, they all said, you know, Indians are the best at stuff, whether it's athletics or art or music or anything. They always said that. And I always took it to heart. So, but they said you have to work at it, because when you do that, you honor your ancestors, you honor the creator, and you honor the bark. If you're gonna, you know, make a basket of bark, you're gonna honor that tree by doing your best with it. And you want to, you know, say thank you to the plants when you take them for medicine or food, and say thank you to the spirit of the animals when you take them for food. So, you know, that's how I grew up. And I went to an elder who was another gifted artist. His name was Gwugwug. And I said, I don't know what I'm doing for school. I don't know, maybe I'd go to art school or education. I don't know, I want to play football. So, you know, that's where I'm headed into college, but I'm not sure where. He goes, well, if you go to art school, don't let them ruin you. That was an interesting native thought. You know, if you go off to that white man's art school, don't let them take the native art out of you. Well, I never did end up going to art school, but I was always drawing. And when you was 1 year old, I got into painting, oil painting. And we had that small apartment in your Uncle Albert's house. And I didn't want to paint with turpentine around a newborn baby. So a friend of mine named John Spinney, we rented a place downtown Old Town, a little tiny room above a store, and we went to town painting. Neither one of us are trained artists, but we got into two-dimensional art, painting. And I just went crazy with it. I thought, you know, I'm going to be the next whatever type of artist. And well, I had a lot to learn. You know, just throwing paint on a canvas doesn't make you an artist. But it's been a long road of self-discovery for me being an artist. But I've always drawn on my Penobscot, you know, my Wabanaki spirit and values to bring that out, the art out of me. I wish there was another name for art. More like spirit, you know, something visual spirit. I don't know. Art seems to be too colonial. We're trying to get away from these colonial concepts. And I think for native art, that's going to be something more to the heart, that because that's where it comes from. It's not academic, you know, art lessons. It comes from the art heart. And that's what I kind of see when I do the etchings in the birch bark. There's just something magical takes over. Once I finish a basket and I start etching, I don't know what's going on. It's like I'm in a Zen state, you know, and I'm not doing drugs. So it actually comes from the bark itself. So, and so anyway, art has been my entire life, as much as athletics and being a dad and now a granddad. You know, I've always been able to do some form of art. And I want to continue it because it is outside of hiking, art, you know, doing paintings and etchings. It's probably what I find to be the most relaxing and meditative thing that I can do. I just go into another state. So, you know, people pay a lot of money to do that, you know, go on vacation, but I just go etch a basket.
Awesome. I struggle too with framing these questions because art just doesn't seem to cover it, you know, what you all do. And I should say up front that I have the utmost respect for these native artists and craftspeople doing this, because I can't do any of it. So I've always been very much in awe of all the creations you all come up with. So I'm thinking about how Native and Indigenous people have, you know, they're so talented in making baskets and paintings and dancing and singing and these expressions of our culture. you know, throughout the years, it's gone from this thing of, you know, we were, you know, not allowed to do this at one point. Our spirituality, our religion was outlawed. We reclaimed some of that in a safe way because we were doing it for audiences that weren't native. We would have people come over and watch us dance in pageants, and we would wear, you know, Western style headdresses. I didn't do that. I know you did it as a child on Indian Island. And so it was like we could practice our culture and our art in this safe way that was palatable to mainstream culture. When our real spiritual sacred things, it was still very dangerous to embrace those. So I see moving through the decades, Native artists kind of reclaiming all of this space and expression, and now you're able to support yourselves on it. And I find that such a beautiful act of resistance, and it's so empowering. So your experience coming from, you know, a little boy dancing outside the teepee for tourists to somebody who's been able to have a livelihood and a huge impact on our communities and our state and our country through your art and your expressions of our culture. How has that journey been, and how your Indigenous identity has been received and accepted in different ways throughout your life?
Boy, that's a good one. A lot there to think about. Yeah, when I was 10 years old, I started dancing for Bruce Pula. And I actually made, on an average, $5 a day dancing for Bruce. And Bruce had traditional regalia that he brought up. He was Kiowa, and he married a Penobscot. So he moved up to Indian Island and opened a store. And when he had enough tourists, he would bang on the drum. He would yell out this phrase in Kiowa. We didn't know what he was saying, but we knew what it meant. It was to get ready and get out behind the place and get ready to dance. So he was quite the showman, and I think you nailed it right. And one of the things you said was, you know, to be accepted for our native skill of dancing and this amazing celebration of life, dancing on the earth, you know, in deerskin moccasin. It had to be through that vaudeville acting format. And, but I didn't think of it at that time. I was 10 years old. I thought, it is so cool to dance. I am dancing. And then your Grammy great, Beatrice, she'd say, oh my God, Barry, you get out there and you dance, you kick it up, you know, and I would, because you can feel that you're honoring, you know, her, you're honoring your entire community when you dance. Plus I could bring home $5 a day as a 10-year-old. How cool is that? You know, so, but I stopped at Mabel's store on the way home, don't worry. Get that penny candy fudge, that was great. And then I got a little older, and I was one of the primary dancers in the pageant where the church would host dancing, and they would make a ton of money. I don't know how they did the advertising, that, you know, non-native people from all over would show up behind the church, and we would dance on the green there between the rectory and the river. It would open up with all of us coming across the river in canoes. How cool is that, right? All these Indians dressed in Western regalia coming across the river in, you know, canvas and aluminum. And I don't think we had plastic canoes back then, but they were like maybe fiberglass too. And they had that fake birch bark design on the outside. Yeah. And I was so proud to be one of the ones who would actually dance in the green corn dance. And I was a young man. All the rest were adults. But it was for the church. That was the host of the pageant. And when you get to the late 60s, early 70s, a new movement swept across Native America, our native homelands, Turtle Island. AIM became a big name out west, and they were the native resistance to the federal government, to crooked tribal governments. And I took notice of it. I was young, I was a teenager, and I took notice of it. And I said, I'm all done dancing for the church. I'll dance for my people, but I'm all done dancing for the church. The church has led us in the wrong direction. And you know, right now we're seeing all the boarding schools, the residential boarding schools with the children being dug up. That, you know, there'll be well over thousands of bodies discovered. And I had a sense of it then. I left the church when I was age 15 because I was becoming my own person. I started attending your Grammy Great and your Grammy Down Street would take me to Onondaga territory, Mi'kmaq territory up in northern Canada. We even drove out to Oklahoma to attend these traditional Native gatherings where elders would sit and talk about what is it to be Native. And they would talk about, you know, reviving traditions. They talked about there would be hard times in the future, and that we had to revive our traditional ways. They didn't give a blueprint as to how to do that, you know. But I came away as a young man going, "Wow, I am Native. I'm Penobscot, but and because back then we were saying I'm Indian." You know, and we are trying to break away from that, I think, at some point, but it's still stuck with us. So, you know, and we said it with such pride. I'm Indian, you know. So when I was young, I ran across a spiritual man from out west. He came to Indian Island, and I was already entertaining this idea of vision quest. And I went to him and I said, you know, do you know about the vision quest? And he, you know, he got real serious and smiled and goes, yes. And he explained to me how to do it. You have to do a sweat, and you have to do this, you have to do that. And I did everything he told me to do. So I went off on my own and I did all this traditional stuff without a whole lot of guidance. But I think when you're of the right mind, guidance comes to us through old pathways of being able to, you know, go down deep inside of ourselves. And I've now called that, you know, kind of connecting with our ancestors. I think that guidance came literally from our ancestors through our genetic code. You know, so you know, when they say, you know, oh, we lost our culture, you know, I always said, no, we just got to bring it back. And this is what that same man told us. He says, you have so much culture here, just reach out and grab it and revive it. And that's so from that point on, I set my mind, that's where my life was going. And in college, you know, taking forestry, oh my goodness, what a slap in the face that was. I went into forestry thinking I'm going to be in the woods making money, you know, protecting the trees, you know, creating a wildlife that's vibrant and clean water, clean air. No. Forestry is about growing trees for the paper industry here in Maine. That, you know, once I got to that revelation, I instantly went to the College of Education and signed up for classes. So I got my 2-year degree in forestry. There were things in there that were very worthwhile, but education definitely was better for me, and it allowed me to play football and run track. So, you know, those were important things to me back then. And so cue me again for if I need to keep going.
I think we've covered a lot of it. This actually leads into a great other topic, and that is, you know, being familiar with your work. You can see behind you your painting of Katahdin. On your baskets, the etchings are all animals, insects, landscapes, people's faces, and it all seems very connected to place and this feeling of home. You know, these people on your baskets, even if you don't know them, they are, you know, they feel home to you. You feel a connection. And I think as Indigenous people, one of our values is we're all connected. We don't own the land. It's part of our experience. It's part of our life ways. And there's a balance, and we take care of it. So thinking about how you do your baskets and your creations, you know, that there's so much respect for the earth and for the climate and for, you know, this sustenance lifestyle. And I feel like that's missing in a lot of dominant culture. And there's this stress on consuming as much as we can and profiting as much as we can, without thinking about the next 7 generations. So thinking about, and we have some of your baskets here that we can see, thinking about what inspires you in your art, it seems to very much be the natural world. So how do you see yourself as a steward of that natural world? And that can be in your art, in your political past, and everything about who you've become and your lifestyle and what you teach other people. First and foremost is caring for the earth, and you really walk that talk. So feel free to go into that.
I got started becoming a basket artist when I got an invitation to the first basket show at the University of Maine Hudson Museum. And well, I didn't make baskets. So I said, I got this invitation to go to a basket show to sell my baskets. I don't make baskets. Laurie says, but you teach how to make baskets, the Indian Island kids, I taught them. And I said, yeah, but, I've never really called myself a basket artist. She said, well, make some, you got a couple of weeks. So I made some very simple fold up birch bark baskets, and don't tell anybody, but the reason I really did it was to kind of infiltrate the ash basket industry. Everybody thinks of native baskets as ash baskets. It's not necessarily that case. It's if that's all we did, we would be putting all our eggs in one basket, and that is what we did. I never saw anybody making birch bark baskets when I was growing up. They made the little tiny canoes, for sale, for the trinkets. So I said, I'll fix them. I'm going to bring birch bark baskets to the show and see what they say. So I brought 7 little fold up baskets that you use for gathering maple sap. And, within the morning, all 7 of them sold. I thought, oh, this is okay. I get it now. You actually make money doing this. So, okay. Because that wasn't my intent. My intent was to revive traditions of our people. So many things, whether it be birch bark baskets, wigwams, or the toughest one of all, the birch bark canoe. My passion was to revive these traditions. And it wasn't necessarily to sell them, but that became an added perk that, as everybody knows, if you work, you get paid for it. You continue to work, you continue to get paid, and all of a sudden you're kind of in a lifestyle pattern. So that got me started. But so we have in Penobscot basketry with birch bark, we have 2 forms. One's called contemporary, and the other is traditional. So when you see the double curve, that's traditional. And if, like this basket we're looking at here is contemporary, where I have the artistic license to do as I see I want to do and being called to do. Let me just talk about this basket while we have it up. I seek inspiration from our culture, and this particular basket has this young girl. She is a water walker. She's from Canada, and she's been awarded international medals for water stewardship. Her grandmother was the first water walker. She carried in a copper pot water from the Great Lakes, and she walked around the Great Lakes, bringing healing to the polluted water. So these people in Indian country, as we call it, became well known, and people would go and walk with them and carry, and the women would carry the copper pot. The men would walk behind the women, and the women would carry the water, kind of like they do in life, when they carry the children. So I made this basket like I did the other baskets that I was making for the show. being inspired by something, I make a basket, I get it done, and then I go, what am I going to put on this? It's like a blank canvas, what can I do? So I actually did her grandmother, who's on the reverse side first, because I wanted Josephine. Josephine was the first walker. And on the side, I have a silhouette of Josephine carrying the copper pot. And then I said, all right, now what do I put on this side? And then that's when I learned of Autumn, Josephine's granddaughter. And I said, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. All right, so I make the basket. We're in a big hurry. We're getting ready to go to the show. We go to Orono and we're standing behind the desk. And I told Laurie, I said, I can't sell this basket. There's something not right about selling this basket. It's got too much tradition, too much sacredness. How do you sell a sacred item? Well, we got car payments to make, It's like, you put all this time in this basket, what are we going to do? So this basket buyer comes to the table. He's always the first one there. He kind of pushes his way through the crowd because he wants to get my best basket as the show opens. And he goes, I'll take this one. And I said, well, I'm struggling. I don't know what to do about this basket. I feel it has a calling beyond being sold to a non-native down in Boston, living in a high-rise building, who's an architect for a living. Just because you have the money to buy it doesn't mean I think I should sell it to you. He says, okay, you've caught my interest. What do you want to do with it? I said, I got an idea. Why don't you donate something towards this basket so I can gift this basket to the young woman that you see etched here? He said, all right, here's $100. So that was the first donation. And we ended up raising money. And we even got more money than I had to price on the basket. So we sent to this young woman and her mom in Canada this basket plus $200. Keep up the good work type of thing. So that's what really inspires me about doing the etchings. And I'll tell you something else too. Another basket I do, I call it my little political statement. It's the corn, squash, and beans. And I call it political, even though it's not political, obviously, but it's my message to get our people back on eating traditional food, get away from the processed food, and look at our food as medicine. So here, let me put it in the form of an etching on a basket, and kind of quietly talk about how important our foods are through the artwork. So, and then there's the faces of the ancestors. This is where I really kind of started, when I talked about that Zen state. You cannot project a picture on this bark. Capturing Autumn here and then capturing the faces of other people that I do, I have a reference photo, but there's no way I can project that photo onto the bark. So I have to do that all by eyesight, freehand. And then you start the etching. You can't really do much for pencil work on it because when you put the water on it, it erases the pencil mark. So I put a couple of marks just to get the composition right. And then I go to etching, and that's when something else takes over. When I'm etching, like this one here, this is a basket like that I call the ancestors. These are old photos, turn of the century, 1900. People who were probably on the longest walk, people who were forced on the reservation, starving because the government wouldn't feed them. I wanted to bring them back. I wanted to bring these people, make them speak to us. So I started doing these faces in the etching, and they I have to kind of put down my knife after a while because it's like they are really speaking to me. They're really coming out. So I remove the red cambium layer, it's called, with a pocket knife. You have to get it wet first, and then I scrape it. And what I scrape off is the red, and then you see the undertone come through. So it's this negative and positive that makes this art. And then I try to get more texture in the shadows. Like some shadows are darker than others, so there's a little technique I do with cross hatching. But this is a very energizing thing to do. Once that basket is completed and I start the etching, it takes a life of its own. I don't have a composition figured out when I do a basket this size. I put down one face, and then I take a break and I look through the book and I find another face that speaks to me, and I put that on, and I keep going until I'm all the way around the basket. Sometimes I'll do the earth. Sometimes I'll do turtles, things of our stories. You can see a loon there. And then another one that came to me was the Madawas with the pipe. And I etched it on a basket because some canoe maker was using it for their canoe company. And I'm thinking, you guys can't do that. You can't take our motifs. So I'm going to take it back. I etched the rabbit with the pipe on a basket, took it to a show. Molly Jeanette Parker, Neptune, came over and she goes, oh my goodness. She goes, I haven't seen that design for a long time. And she goes, my grandmother used to tell me what that was. And it's, she couldn't remember it. I'm going, oh, what is it? You got to tell me. She goes, oh, let me go back to my table and I'll sit down and I'll come back when I remember it. She was back in 5 minutes. Madalawinu, very ancient, very powerful medicine symbol. And I was like blown away thinking, wow, that I knew there was a reason I had to bring that back. So that's what this art form does. It transforms art. It goes way beyond art. It puts me in direct touch with ancestors. And that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, as we think about those ancestors, you mentioned the bodies of the children that they're finding in the residential school, unmarked graveyards. And I think a lot of people in America and Canada are having a big reckoning with this, and they're very shocked. And, they see this as some, huge tragedy, and they're at a loss for how this could happen. Those of us in tribal communities, we know that this happened. It's woven into our stories and our journeys. And this isn't ancient history. This wasn't happening all that long ago. And in Maine, there's been a lot of work around looking at the foster care system and children that were removed from their homes, put into non-native foster homes with no due process and no real reasons. And then those people are often abused and mistreated in these foster homes. And thinking about this concept of genocide, I think a lot of times we think about it as something that happened when Columbus came and the Pilgrims and the bounties and the scalping. But this genocide occurred throughout the generations, and it was the ripples from those initial, acts all through the taking of the children by the church and by the government and by these systems. So we are left with a generation of people out of touch with their identity, searching, trying to come home, like we talk about in this exhibit. So, thinking about, I think a lot of us right now are left with, people want to know, how do we make this better? How do we reconcile this horrible past? A lot of people in dominant society might want to ignore it because it's easier to not feel that guilt. Or people think that, okay, now the natives are going to rise up and want revenge. And, and it's thinking about a lot of things going on in Maine with coming to terms with this 1980 Maine Indian land claim settlement and how our sovereignty has been undermined all these years. I guess when you're thinking about the atrocities of history and all that our people have been through, the current inequity and everything we're still fighting for, how do we best tell everybody on this Zoom, everybody that supports us, and those that don't understand any of these things yet, what do these reparations look like? What does land back mean? How can we kind of walk forward in a good way when we're all trying to either heal from this or understand it?
Well, Native people are our own best voices. And we come from a long line of well-spoken voices. Native people, by far, in my experience, do something in our talks that we learn from a young age, and that I don't find that other cultures do it the way we do it. They may have their own way of doing it, but I think ours is special. You started in the circle talking at a very young age. All of our youth have been raised to have a voice. We've all been brave to speak from the heart in our own communities. But we are now being called upon to speak from the heart and with intellectual devices that can help us say what we need to say, to a much broader audience. And that audience is quite diverse. So, the skit, the slapping medicine man? All right, so the guy's a drunk and he goes to the medicine man and says, I need help. He says, well, what's your problem? He goes, I've been drinking. So this medicine man slaps him. He says, now stop your drinking. And I it's funny, but I like it because it just gets right to the heart of the matter. So I kind of, when I'm talking to non-native people, I'll say, you guys are enjoying the benefits of your ancestors having stolen our land. And I just drop it in their lap with that slap, Well, where does it go from there? Well, some of them will be very defensive. Hey, I didn't do it. Get over it, chief. We hear all that. And what's so remarkable, though, I spoke last night down in Skowhegan to a group, I don't know, maybe 40 people. I didn't get any of those comments. I got a lot of, what do you call it? They understood what I was saying and they appreciated it. And maybe they didn't like hearing some of the things I said, but they didn't counter it. They didn't find it defensive. I'm finding in non-Native America, so many people are learning to listen because they're not putting up a defensive wall. They're saying, okay, now I get it. I see that this happened now. So I share things early and often, get the message out there. You stole the land, now you got to give it back. All right, and then you get their attention. How do we do that? Well, okay, good. Now we can talk. There's many different ways we're getting our land back right now. And I found through my own introspection that land back is the only path to reconciliation for stolen land. Don't give us money, give us land. And I shouldn't even say give us land. That's just, it's English. But return that authority of that parcel of land back to its original people who had authority over that. We governed our lands. We monitored them. We lived in them. We made sure that the beaver were plentiful, that the caribou were plentiful, and the moose. And we didn't over produce our crops. We did it in balance. But this is a much, for me right now, listening and finding out about the children in the mass graves, the thousands now that have been uncovered, and there'll be more here in the United States. What would that reconciliation look like? It is a good question that I think, once we get over this deep sense of mourning, we have to take a serious look at. And again, the only reconciliation for non-native people stealing our land is for non-native people to give it back. And if you look at the non-native people responsible for the death of these children, it's up to them, not us, but it's up to them who committed these heinous crimes to come forward and offer not thoughts and prayers, but some serious. You can't get their lives back. We can get land back, but we can't get these children's lives back. So we have to focus on our future children. What can the church and these governments do to ensure that this never happens again? And that Native people who are alive today, who survived these schools, what can be done for them? I know a dear man who is a medicine person, and he still struggles with this today. He witnessed the death of a friend at a boarding school. He was sexually abused. And to this day, he's older than I am. He still suffers from it. So when you look at that person, on the street, and maybe they're drunk, maybe they want to commit suicide, and you don't know what to think about them. I'm learning, even in my older years now, to stand back and say, where did that come from? How is it this person got to this point in their life where they're still suffering? And then you find out what their story is. And it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Maybe they're Vietnam veteran, and they never had that chance to reconcile what happened there. So I think for Native America, and because we don't recognize the Canadian border, United States border, we're all one people. There has to be a Turtle Island wide movement that calls upon these institutions to come forward and let's sit down at the table and let's talk. One thing I mentioned earlier today to you was, we had a massacre right here in I hate to say the state of Maine, I really do, in Wabanaki land on the Kennebequatuck, which they call the Kennebec. And our ancestors, yours and my direct ancestors, were part of that massacre. Our bloodline comes from that massacre, from a survivor who went to Penobscot, and she carried across her back, across the river, a boy who is our ancestor. That's how the story goes. So I knew about that growing up, because she would go into the Catholic Church and you see a stained glass window that said Father Rawl. He was killed along with our ancestors. 100 and something of our Native people were killed, but who got the name on the stained glass window? The French priest. No mention of our people. So we have a thing in Indian country called the Sacred Runs, where we will run hundreds of miles, typically in relay, carrying a fire from one reservation to another and holding big ceremonies. I think these need to come back. I think we need to have sacred runs all over Turtle Island, unifying our people first of all, getting our people unified, and then we'll be of one mind then. Facebook is good, social media is good. We can talk to each other from California to who knows where, but we have to start doing an event. We have to put our bodies in motion, not just our minds and hearts, but our full body. And so back in the 90s, we were asked to do a sacred run carrying the Wabanaki Confederacy fire from Odanak to Indian Island. I wanted to do that run, but I was strapped with work. I was teaching at the school, and Mark Rankle wanted to do the run, but he too had work. So Mark and I told your Uncle Butch, all right, you guys get that fire to Corbin Gore. All right, so that's just up the road from Simpson's place. All right, so, and we'll meet you there. Okay, well, they didn't meet us there. They were so far behind schedule. So Mark and I looked at each other and said, it's 9 o'clock at night. What do we do? They're not here. Well, let's just go. We'll just take off, and they'll figure it out somehow that we went ahead. So Mark and I it was just the two of us, and we had one car. I would drive up a half mile. Mark would run with a sacred stick with eagle feather on it. And I drove up a half mile. And when he got to me, I was out of the car, ready to take the sacred stick. And when he gave it to me, he said, Norwich Walk. And oh my God, I just got chills all over my body. I took off sprinting. I had to run. The Butch said, you guys need to make up 50 miles for us. So 50 miles from Coburn Gore puts us in Kingfield. So our big goal running all night was to get all the way to Kingfield. But every time we passed the baton off to each other, or the sacred stick, sorry. I'm still running track in my old days. We would say Norwich Walk. We got to Kingfield in no time flat. We covered 50 miles like it was just around the corner. And the sun was almost coming up. We figured we still have time to keep going. So let's just keep going. So we went from Kingfield and we hit the Kennebec River and we went south. We ended up in Madison. We crossed the river in Madison and we said, we don't know where to go. Let's just go downriver. So we took a right at the light and we ran and drove down just one more half mile. And we said, all right, we're going to pull over here and we're going to wait for Butch and the team to show up. Mark had a bag phone, so he called, Jerry was part of the team, so he called Janet and said, hey, we made it down to Madison. So when you get a hold of Butch and the guys, tell them we made it to Madison. So Mark and I said, okay, let's take a nap. Just before I closed my eyes, I looked up at the street sign where we had parked. It said Father Rawls Street. So Butch and everybody showed up. Hours later, they were hooping and hollering. We made up 80 miles for the guys. We put them back on their schedule so that they could deliver the fire at Indian Island at noontime sharp was the goal, and they did it. But before we left, we went down that road, that Father Rawls Road, down to where we currently do the memorial ceremony for our ancestors that were massacred. And when we got there, there were people in that group that could feel pains in their side, in their shoulders, in their back. And I didn't, but others did. So we did a ceremony. The guys ran off to Indian Island and I went home. A year later, to the day, we had moved, in the meantime, we had moved to Solon and I was in this house. And I told Laurie, I said, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like I need to be somewhere. She said, well, I don't know, what's today? She looked at the calendar. She said, oh my goodness, a year ago you were on that sacred run and you guys did a ceremony at Norwich Walk. So I called up your Grammy-Down Street and I said, you got to get Uncle Butch and get people to come over. We're going to have a ceremony for our ancestors. We're going to start doing it annually. And so we had a lot of elders come over. They just jumped in their cars and flew right over. It's almost a 2-hour drive. And when they got there, they felt those pains again. I didn't feel them, but they did. We had ceremony. Irene made us offer food to the ancestors. So everybody kind of went through their through their cars, like, I got some crackers, I got an apple, it's half eaten. But whatever we had, we offered to the ancestors. And then I decided at that point, we needed to continue this ceremony for those ancestors so that at someday they can rest in peace. We did 7 years in a row. And on the 7th year, the women in that group were saying, I don't feel any pains anymore. I actually feel happiness. So it was almost like we did it. We had to do it for 7 years. I mean, we're still doing it now, but it has to be at least 7 years that you do a ceremony for it to become, I don't know, strong enough for the ancestors to be able to rest in peace. And I think that's what we need to do for these kids. It has to be something big, has to be something very meaningful.
I agree. Yeah.
So get your running shoes ready.
Sign me up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maulian and Barry, I wanted to jump in and let you know that we're coming up on an hour, and wanted to see if there was any Q&A out there, and if anybody has any attendees have anything they want to contribute to the Q&A, we would still have a few minutes to be able to answer some questions if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm seeing one from Melissa Prescott as a good question. What advice do you have for non-native school teachers who want to decolonize their curriculum and teaching practices and live up to the spirit of LD 291? Also, any advice for arts teachers specifically?
I just did a school with an art teacher. She was a great help. And she had a question for me. She goes, now can I do this? And I said, no. Okay. Native art is to be done by Native people. Now, Native curriculum is different. Curriculum in the school, LD 291. My number one advice is to have Native people come into your class. You can have all the fancy curriculum, the books and all that as resources, which help. But the Native people ourselves have the voice that the kids can listen to. They can experience a Native person in real time, instead of books that tend to put us in the past. Because we're living here today. So I think the state of Maine, who made this law, needs to live up to its obligation and fund it, so that schools who are not looking at the ocean, schools that cannot afford to bring in Native residency, can apply to the state government to get funding to bring in Native people. And I would make sure that the 5 reservations that have membership, the census, they know who we are, that these Native people be vetted through our tribal governments. As like you do, you go to college to become a certified teacher, you got to know your stuff. And because there are non-Native people acting as Native people, going into schools and teaching what they don't know. And I caught them doing it. And I want the schools to know that when you sign up a Native person, you have to get a Native person. So anyway, art teachers are great, but also history teachers, and it's really for the whole school. One teacher shouldn't be kind of hogging the resource, because the message that we deliver has such a far-reaching message in terms of the fact that we have a legacy, a history here in this area going back 13,000 years, and we have a lot to offer, past and present, and that we need to develop relationships going in the future. So get Native people in the schools. Some of the school visits I've done have been on the school's diversity day. Those are cool. You got people from all over the world who actually live in this area, and they come into the school. They may be wearing their traditional, clothing, and it's really, really awesome. They put us all in a room to have lunch, and we all get to chat amongst ourselves. It's pretty cool, and I think that experience for the student, they'll never forget. I have adults come up to me and say, I had you when I was in 5th grade, when you came to my school, and I remember that was so cool. And sometimes I'll make a little fire out of bow and drill, or I'll actually do some hands-on stuff. But I think even though art is critical, so isn't music, so isn't history, so isn't everything. So the number one thing I would recommend is get a Native person in that school and make time with those students face to face.
I think we're about at time, Dan. I'll leave it up to you how you would like to wrap up. Would you like us to take one more? Or?
Is there one more? I haven't been tracking to see.
There's one we can probably answer quickly. Language matters. What are your thoughts on the acronym BIPOC versus Native with respect to naming yourself? I could probably go quickly. So BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. I call myself Penobscot, and then I call myself Indigenous. I do consider myself a woman of color, person of color. BIPOC works I think, but I'm also sensitive to the people that feel left out by that. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Oh,
And I just saw something else that came in. Somebody was asking about it being recorded, and yes, we have been recording the program, and it will be available as a link after this, and it posted on the website along with information about the show. Thank you both, Maulian, Barry. It was a really excellent program. I was happy to be present for it. I didn't intend to have myself as a head on the screen with you the entire time, but I think it worked out all right. To close too, I also wanted to say thanks to everyone who's made the Always Home exhibit possible here. Curators Kathleen Mundell and Jennifer Neptune, all exhibiting artists, organizations, and individuals who have loaned work, including the Penobscot Museum, Colby College Museum of Art, and the Hudson Museum. Thanks to the exhibition designer, Mark Spruill, and Monson Arts staff for hanging and keeping this show open. The exhibit will be up through October here in Monson. We have regular gallery hours that are Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 5. And also a thanks to the Maine Arts Commission and the Maine Bicentennial Commission for additional financial support. We hope that everybody who attended tonight's program, as well as Barry and Maulian, can make it up here to see the exhibit while it's running. We will be putting together some other programming in conjunction with the show in the coming months. We have a live demonstration with Gabriel Frey that will be happening next month. So stay in touch and stay tuned for other events and programs that will happen. That's it. Thank you guys again. This was really excellent.
my
Thank you.
pleasure.
All right.
Thank you, Maulian. We'll leave
Yeah,
and eat.
see you tomorrow.
Yep.
Good night.
Night.
All right.